Stephanie Abrams here, dashing through the airport. I'm going on an adventure. I've got my backpack, I've got my laptop, I've got my traveling shoes on. Come along with me. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I want you to get real cozy, comfortable. You have a favorite chair? Settle into it. You might have to imagine you've got a seatbelt that you can buckle up, because we'll go off on some interesting paths today and every week at this time. And I want you to be here with me, so it's nice to know that you're out there and having fun with us. Little homework. We want you to make sure that you follow up with us at Abrams, that's SABRAMS.com, which will lead you into our family of award-winning websites. Easy for you to say, Roger Rabbit. And so what we're hoping is that you'll follow up with everything we talk about on the air, online, and also when we conclude this broadcast hour, Travel with Stephanie Abrams, my nationally heard radio show on BizTV Radio Network, we'll pick up from there for 3 hours of continuing radio, and we'll go into overtime, and occasionally we'll take our guests with us that we've got on TV with us into the overtime as well. As far as it relates to the radio shows, you'll find them podcast and archived at sabrams.com with show notes, and you'll want to check out my blog at sabrams.com/blog. And thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of photos of places we've visited all over the world. So it's going to be an exciting time for us. I have to share something with you, because you know I'm crazed. So here, I'm messing up everything. Isn't that the cutest ever? And I really wanted you to see this because, well, it's a kind of commemorative of the very first show. So welcome, and let's get down to it. We have so much we want to be talking about today, and I'm just wondering, we put out a couple of press releases and lots of noise on radio and told our radio listeners to go and tune into their local TV stations. And so I understand that we've actually received some questions. I want to remind you, when you go to sabrams.com, there's a place way up at the top that says Ask Stephanie. And you can click there. It's going to take you over to forums where you scroll down till you come to the Ask Stephanie portion. And in order to leave a question there, you're going to need to go way at the top of that page, click on register, give yourself a username and password, and then you'll be able to do more than just read. You'll be able to write too. So send us your questions, because I can't wait to see them. But we did receive questions that were sent to us, and I know we've got a few picked out that we're going to answer. So Mark, our producer, is going to read them for us.
Yeah, hi Stephanie. The first one is from Hoyt. He was watching on WBMQ TV in New York, and he wants to know, he's planning a trip to Asia, and he has 7 months on his passport. Is that going to be a problem?
Wow. Okay. It depends on when you're going. If you're leaving next week and you're coming back anytime in the next 5 months or 6 months, you'll be fine. But if you're not planning your trip until, let's say, June, well, that's going to leave you only a couple of months left on your passport before it expires. And I'm making the assumption you're talking about a United States passport. Because in general, for most destinations in the world, not all of them, but for most of them, you need to have 6 months left on your U.S. passport. Now, if you are an adult, your U.S. passport is good for 10 years. And if you only have 6 months left, if you have 7 months now, by the time June would roll around, you'd only have a few months left, 2 or 3. Well, that's a problem. And that's a problem because you, according to U.S. rules and most other countries, need to have 6 months left on your passport at the time that you're leaving. So if you have fewer than 6 months, the chances are good the airline is going to deny boarding, which means you don't get on the plane, which means if you had a non-refundable fare, you're in trouble because you're going to lose that money. Unless the airline is willing to cooperate with you, you've got a real problem, an economic problem on your hands. And it's never a good idea to be outside of the country with, even if you left 10 months before your passport expired, but you are planning to be away for 9 months. If you ran into a problem, you were injured, you felt ill, something happened that delayed your return, by the time you were ready to come back to the US, you'd have an invalid passport, which means wherever you are, you need to be finding the US passport office, which would be associated with the US Embassy. And that's one of the reasons you have to be careful about going to countries where we have no embassy, because then what do you do? And there are countries like that where we have no embassy. So we're going to continue with our questions right after this. Hi, I'm Stephanie Abrams, and you know I love to go traveling, and I bet you do too, and that's why you're watching. But if you're going traveling, there are some things that you absolutely need. One is a passport, and another is something to entertain you, perhaps other than a video game while you're traveling. Maybe when you crawl in bed at night, or while you're on an airplane, or maybe waiting at the airport. Try Rumors by Stephanie Abrams. You'll find it at every online bookseller. It's a story of intrigue, mystery, love, lust, romance, and all wrapped up in rumors in a community where people like to talk about one another. And the end result, you'll never see coming. It's full of twists and turns, fast-paced, and people just love it. Go read the reviews and get yourself a copy for traveling with. Rumors by Stephanie Abrams. I wanted to finish up a little more about this passport question because it's a very serious one. If you've just joined us, hi, I'm Stephanie Abrams. And I hope you come back every week. This being our first episode of Travel TV with Stephanie Abrams. The question I was asked is, I have 7 months left on my passport. I'm going to Asia. Is that okay? It really depends on how long you plan to be away. If you plan to be away 8 months, you're going to have a problem coming home. But at the moment, if you left today, you wouldn't have a problem. You wait until you are 6 months or less from the date of the expiration, and then you really do have a problem, because if nobody notices, if your travel agent doesn't notice, if the airline where you enter the information, if you make your own reservation online, they ask you for your passport information, they're going to ask you about expiration date. If they don't notice that you're going to be within 6 months of expiration of the passport, so far you've gotten away with it. When you get to the airport to check in, there's probably going to be somebody there checking you in who notices, and they will deny you boarding. That's a problem. What's the solution? Generally speaking, I apply for a new passport when I only have 10 months left on my current passport. Got that? That's because sometimes the passport offices get very busy, and it might take them a couple of months to get back to you. There are passport services you can use, and they will, you overnight them all your documentation and your old passport that's about to expire, and the payment format for paying them, not only for the passport services, but you can pay for a rush service. And you can almost get your passport in 48 hours. If you overnight everything to the passport service people, and I like to use passport people who have an office in Washington, D.C., because every embassy in the world that we do business with is in Washington, which means if you need not just your passport renewed, but you need a visa, they can get that for you. And what happens is your documents arrive on Tuesday because you overnighted them Monday. So they'll get them, you mark it for 10 a.m. delivery. They'll get your documentation before 10 a.m. on Tuesday morning. Their folks will take all your documentation, and they'll walk you through so you send the right stuff. And they'll take it down to the the U.S. passport office, and additionally, or if your passport is still valid, you just need a visa from Russia or China or Thailand or someplace. And they'll go get it all, and they'll get it back by 5 o'clock in an envelope, overnighted to you. So if you look at your passport and go, oh my word, I'm in trouble here, and you don't have time to wait 6 weeks for a busy passport office, especially in the spring, the late winter, early spring is probably the busiest time of the year for the passport office. And you have to check because the recent government shutdown may have already affected backing up of people getting passports. So the last time we had a shutdown, it added about 4 to 6 weeks to the time turnaround period to get yourself a renewed passport. So you want to pay attention to that because that's something of serious value. I'm also concerned about the potential of your getting overseas and then finding out that you're kind of stuck overseas for some reason beyond your control, and you have a passport that's expired. You know, it kind of reminds me of the film The Terminal with Tom Hanks. If you haven't seen that, you must see that film. But you don't want to be that guy that's living in the airport because you have some passport problems. We're going to take a quick commercial break and we're going to come right back. This is Stephanie Abrams. Don't go away. Stay with me. We'll be right back. I'm delighted you're with us, and I hope you come back every week at this station, at this time, and join us so that we can talk about travel, because travel is such an important and integral part of not only your professional life, but also very much a part of your personal life. And everything that happens in the travel industry is really important to just about everybody, not only in the U.S., but around the world. It's all just so integrated and integral together. We put out, looking forward to our very first episode of Travel TV with Stephanie Abrams, a call for questions that people might have that we thought would be picking through, worthy of being discussed. And so I understand, Mark, that we've got some more questions over there. Let's see if we can plow through them.
Yes, we do, Stephanie. This is from Chris, and he's watching you on KFLA TV in Los Angeles. And his question is, I was in a crowded USA International Airport.
Probably LAX.
Yeah, probably. And about 10 planes had landed all at the same time, and there were 3,000 some odd people online waiting to go through passport control. But some people went to a different line, and they seemed to be in and out of there in no time at all. How do I get to do that?
Well, first of all, I have to tell you something funny. It's because I come out of the travel industry with a rather strong reputation for decades of leadership in travel, that when I saw the commercial come on TV for a product and their name flashed on the screen and it said LAX, I wondered why Los Angeles International Airport was advertising, but it turned out to be a company that sells a laxative. So I thought that was very funny. But Los Angeles International Airport, if you have ever flown through it, making a connection, as I have many times, I've always lived on the East Coast, but often I have flown and had to change planes at LAX, the airport, and continue onward to the Pacific and parts of Asia. And that is one huge airport. So the concept of 10 international flights coming in at the same time, not unusual. Most planes these days carry an average of somewhere between 250 and above 300 passengers, depending on which aircraft style it is. So to have 3,000 people waiting in line to go and be examined before the U.S. Customs and Border Protection people. Take a look at the passport, ask you a question, where were you, blah, blah, take your little form that you filled out. It can take a long time. One trip, we were coming in, we landed in Newark Airport, Newark's Liberty Airport, and in New Jersey. There were over 3,000 people in that immigration hall. We were in line over an hour. Worse than that, we were in line with people who were coughing, which made me completely insane because, you don't want to come home with something you caught in somewhere along the route, especially standing in line in a terminal. When we got up to the Customs and Border Protection officer, he looked at our passports, saw how much travel we do, and he said, you really should join, be accepted by, get into the Global Entry Program, which we now refer to as Global Entry and Trusted Traveler. And I said, what's that? And he had a little one of those Take One acrylic devices at his desk that was holding these little brochures. And the brochure was about global entry, and I thanked him. And then I read about it, and we went through and waited for our luggage. By that point, our luggage was already there because we'd been so long in the hall. It was no longer even on the carousel. It was just lined up against the wall with luggage that hadn't yet been claimed. And what global entry does, go to Google and just put in the letters GOES, that's spelled GOES, GOES. And that stands for Global Online Entry System. It's really the best thing the United States government has ever done for the traveler. It's fabulous. And not only can people who have U.S. passports apply, there are a half dozen or a dozen countries that their citizens are eligible to go through the process and become part of the Global Entry Program. So what is it? It's a quick in and out of that big international arrivals hall. You land, like this, who was it? Chris, was it? That was out in Los Angeles asking Chris. Chris, it's a great question. You must have been fascinated to see you were still stuck in that long line, dragging your luggage, well, you hadn't gotten your luggage yet, dragging your carry-on luggage around with you, while you noticed there were people who were on your flight and other arriving flights. They had a special lane roped off for them. And there are big arrows generally on big banners that point to, all it says is Global Entry Kiosk. You walk down there. It's a special lane just for you. And when you walk down this lane, depending on the airport, there may be anywhere from a minimum of 2 or 3 kiosks to maybe a dozen or many dozens of these kiosks. You walk up to the kiosk after you've become a member of Global Entry. The first thing it does is it asks you to take your passport, open it to that page with your picture on it, put it face down and slide it into the little tray on the front of this machine. Looks like an arcade game machine. And then it's got a little screen. And it asks you to put down 4 fingers of either your left or right hand, and you lay your fingers down. A little tip: don't move your fingers around once you put them down. I put my fingers out this way and then I drop them. So, because if you wiggle around, it'll get rejected. And they'll send you back to that line. You don't want that. So, put your fingers down, and then it's going to identify you. And mine will say, "Hello, Stephanie Abrams. Did you just arrive on flight number this and that?" And you click on the screen, yes. And then magically on the screen comes up all those questions they ask you on that white form with the blue lettering from the United States government, your re-entry form for customs, that asks you, did you pet a horse? Where you want to farm, you've been with livestock, are you carrying more than $10,000, which is not illegal, but you must declare it if you are. It'll ask you, there are just 3 or 4 questions, 4, maybe 5 questions that are asked on this form. Instead of filling it out on the plane, and you want to be sure to tell the flight attendants, do not wake me up with that form when you come around. Instead of doing that, you simply do touching of the screen, answering yes or no, yes or no, yes or no to all the questions, and it takes you to the next page, walks you through. In less than a minute, you will have a receipt that comes out complete with your photo on it that the machine took while you were doing this, and you go right through to the Border Patrol people, and bing, bing, bing. You're waiting for your luggage before it ever gets there, and everybody else is stuck in that big hall, coughing at one another, waiting to get through immigrations. We're going to take a quick commercial break and come back. Don't leave me. Oh, we're only getting started. So much more to come. Stay tuned. Don't leave me. Stephanie Abrams, waiting for you. I'm so delighted you're with us, and we're getting knee-deep into questions that our TV viewers have been sending to us. And actually, they were sending them over the last week because we put out an alert and asked the local stations if they could let everybody know we're coming on. If anybody had questions, send them ahead. We'll deal with them. So we've gone through 2. What's the next one?
Stephanie, this one's from Leslie, and she's watching on WFXZ TV in Boston. And she wants to know, what is the best time to travel?
Oh, Leslie, I'm going to give you, and how do we know Leslie is a girl? That could be a guy.
Oh, that's true. I'm just making an assumption.
That's a problem sometimes too, when you're filling out passport information, when you're making a reservation. If you have a name that could be like the name Chris, could be a man, could be a woman, you want to make sure you designate it so when you get to an airport or a car rental or somebody, they're usually a little more flexible, but nonetheless, you want to make sure that everything is copacetic and there are no surprises. When's the best time to travel? Okay. The best time to travel is when you have the time. And it would be nice if you had the health and you had either the money in your pocket or a credit card with enough credit on it that you can afford to put a little more on and be able to take care of it when you get back from your trip. Don't postpone travel. Don't wait for perfect. There is no such thing as perfect. You can plan a trip after all kinds of research that this is the time of the year when this destination has the very best weather. And you'll get there and it won't be. Or something else will happen. There's a real problem too about waiting for the best time in your life. Far too many people who want to travel, who want to go places, put it as a high priority in their mind, but it's not a high priority on their to-do list. So everything else comes before it, and life has a very nasty way of getting in the way of your plans and your hopes and your dreams. And if you want to find out more about that, stop into any hospital emergency waiting room where somebody is sitting on pins and needles worried about a loved one who's being taken care of in the emergency room and wishing they had taken that trip to Bermuda or taken that cruise or gone to Europe or done things that they said they were going to do that now circumstances may be such that they may never get to do it. Or if they do, it's going to be a very different kind of a trip. So the best time to go? Now. Now is the best time to go, Leslie. Decide. Your life will be any way you want it. You can't have everything you want, but you can have anything you want. So decide what that is. And if it's travel, you're going to have to make some sacrifices here or there. You're going to change your priorities a little bit. Get up and go. I can tell you one thing. You will never regret going. You may regret not going. I hope that helps. When you go, let me know. Let me know where you went, what you did. We'll rejoice together. And if you need help with your trip, go to Ask Stephanie. And so sabrams.com, click on the top on Ask Stephanie. Make sure you register with a username and password. Drop me a line there, and we'll get you started. We'll get you rolling. Mark?
Stephanie, we have one from Frederica, and she's watching you on WPMF-TV in Miami. And she wants to know what your favorite island is.
Ah, yes, that's a good one. You know, it's funny. I was at I don't know, some kind of an event about a year ago. And it was one of those fancy, snooty kind of events where people like to one-up others. I used to live in communities like that. It's really exhausting. But the kind of thing that someone will say, oh, did you see this Broadway show? And you say, oh, yes, wasn't it wonderful? And their answer will be, oh, I saw it with the original cast. By the way, the one-up to that came quite naturally. I wasn't trying to one-up anybody, but it was the ultimate one-up. That conversation truly happened. And when this woman said, oh, I saw it with the original cast, I said, oh, I saw it in London. So, you know, that crushed the lady, but that wasn't my intention. It just happened to be the truth. So recently at another function, big event, everybody was so dressed up, someone asked me what was my favorite island. And I found out later in the conversation that she was prepared to tell me that St. Kitts is her favorite island and that they have a condo or villa there, and isn't that all? And it wasn't St. Kitts, actually, it was St. Bart's. Both lovely places. And so it was a great shock to her that we couldn't get into that let's compete for favorite island stories. The way people compete with seeing Broadway shows or whatnot. Amazingly, my answer to her was my favorite island is Ireland. She thought I was going to say somewhere in the Caribbean or maybe somewhere in the Pacific. I don't think she expected me to say somewhere in Europe. And I said, and coming a close second is Malta. Have you been to Malta? Or she hadn't been to Malta. That's a place you have to go to. But interestingly, there are islands in the Caribbean, and I'm guessing that's what your question was probably aimed at, that I adore. Jamaica's at the top of my list. I love Jamaica, and part of the reason I love Jamaica, aside from it has so many of the other elements that every other island has. You know, wonderful beaches and beautiful scenery, but Jamaicans are amazing people. And we've had a long association on radio with Jamaica, and we're looking forward to having them work with us to bring you travel TV with Stephanie Abrams, because it's an island that is ever evolving in an even more wonderful way. So, but Ireland is without doubt an island destination that I'm completely smitten with, and maybe I should give you some insights into why. How do we describe Ireland? If there's anything you're interested in, anything at all, music, dance, literature, crafts, art, food, oh, that's a good one, because there are still people, particularly in America, who have harbored old stories their grandmother told them, or their aunt went to Ireland in the 1980s and came back talking about what a wonderful time she had, but she was tired of eating fish and chips and mushy peas and shepherd's pie and burgers. That's not Ireland today. And so, you know, if you're an outdoorsy person, there's everything from surfing, and there are international surfing champions who surf on the west coast of Ireland. The Finn McCool Surf School is based in County Donegal, and two Irish surfing champions founded and have been running it. I haven't talked to them in a while, but if nothing's changed, they still are. If you're interested in hiking, biking, sailing, you name it, you're going to find it in Ireland. But also the history, the landscapes, the seascapes, and their native treasure, the people. And one of the things I find is that when you talk about going to a destination, like I've just mentioned Jamaica, you know, because of the people, I'll often hear people say, I don't need to go somewhere to meet people. I have plenty of friends. I have lots of relationships at home. I don't have to go get in an airplane to go and meet people. I'm here to tell you, yes, you do. You go to Ireland, and the experiences that you have there will change your life for the better. The mentality of the people, we've become a kind of chip on the shoulder society. And worse than that, because we're afraid of pedophiles, because we're afraid of terrorists, we don't even smile at each other. I smile at a child in a restaurant and she looks the other way at her mother to see if is that dangerous. Should I smile back? Irish people, hospitality, warmth, charm, sense of humor, and faith and optimism have gotten them through the most horrible hardships you can possibly imagine. And so we're going to take a quick break and come back and talk about that a little more before we move on to another important subject. This is Stephanie Abrams. Don't leave me. Please don't go away. There's so much more to come. I'm really glad that I was asked the question about my favorite island destination, and I guess most people would be answering the questions by answering with a name of an island destination somewhere between Bermuda and Bonaire. But Ireland does qualify. It is an island, and it is a remarkable place. And generally speaking, I have this silly man and some directional signals on how to get where. I thought you might be interested in seeing him. Isn't he cute? But he reminds me of how much, let me get this out of the way, how much fun, how many wonderful experiences I have when I'm traveling in Ireland. And in fact, I'm working on my first travel guide, 1001 Reasons to Visit Ireland, which we hope to see published this spring. So if you're planning a trip to Ireland, check and see at any of the online booksellers if 1001 Reasons to Visit Ireland by herself, the elf, Stephanie Abrams, is out and published, because I've been working on it, it feels like forever. The reason I started writing this travel guide is that I haven't found a travel guide to Ireland in English yet that is worthy of the destination. Often I read what people have recommended for hotels. Sometimes, most of the time, I've never even heard of these hotels. I don't know where they are. I don't know what makes them special. And I look at the attractions that are presented. The danger in planning yourself a trip to Ireland is to go online and go for, you can do it. You'd wonder, why write a guide when you can just go and Google 10 great places to visit on the East Coast and the South and the North and the West and the Midlands, now called the Lakelands. And then pick a place that looks like it could be decent and maybe it's affordable or cheap. And when you're all done, you're in the wrong place, everything is inconvenient, you don't really know what you're doing. I often read what's written about places that are truly glorious places to visit. And I say to myself, the person who wrote this could not possibly have visited this destination, or they couldn't have written this about it. So, having seen that happen enough times, I decided I need to write a travel guide to Ireland and give travelers not only the information on what I view, in my opinion, as the best places to stay and where to visit when you are staying in that place, so it all fits together like a hub and spokes. After plowing through literally 15 different travel guides to Ireland, I noticed that a hotel that is so wonderful, it's really not a hotel, it is a country house. It's called Rathsala Country House. It's located in County Wicklow, Ireland. It's in a beautiful area. While it's not in the town of Dunlavin, that's what its address is because that's where their mail goes to the post office. But it's really a kind of countryside location with a golf course, wonderful golf course right next to it. And I only saw that property recommended in one of the travel guides, and I don't get it. Why wouldn't it be there? My husband and I took a friend traveling with us one Christmas, and we stayed at Rathsala Country House for a couple of nights during that visit. And she said to me at breakfast the next morning, if I get married again, this is where I'll honeymoon. So it's that kind of place that touches people, that you connect with in the most beautiful way. And the people who own and operate it are the O'Flynns, Joe and Kay O'Flynn, Joe Sr., and his son, Joe Jr., who's not so junior, by the way, and their wonderful dog, Beckett, a big, fluffy, golden retriever, and roosters that walk around the property. I said to them, Joe, why are you overlooked in all these travel guides? And Joe Jr. said to me, truly in the most loving but condescending way, Stephanie, don't you know how these things work? Well, this is my first travel guide, and it won't be my last if I get to live long enough. But no, I don't really know how it works, so fill me in. And he said, generally speaking, if you don't pay, you're not listed. And then it all fell together, because there are so many properties, which is the industry term for hotels and resorts, that ought to be included in every guidebook to Ireland, and you just don't see them. And so it's not just pull up some online travel agent group listing what they think are the top 20 or the top 10 places to stay, because you don't know what you're getting. You really don't know what you're getting. What I would recommend, in addition to taking along 1,001 Reasons to Visit Ireland with you on your next trip when the book finally comes out, which I hope is sooner rather than later, find a travel agent who is a specialist on booking Ireland trips, so that you get the kind of input and insight that you are not going to be able to do with brain surgery self-inflicted, which is what happens when you just decide, well, I can put this together, I know how to use the internet. So, bottom line, you'll find perfect days. Visit these places, stay at this place. Next day, visit these places, stay at that place. And for some places that are very rich in places to visit, both directly in the city center and the environs, for instance, Dublin or Galway, then there'll be perfect days 1, 2, or 3, and maybe 4 and 5 if you wanted to base yourself there and tour around as a result. But as a destination, it is a most extraordinary place, and will touch you in a way that I promise you, you'll be in Ireland for a few days when you're already planning your next trip. The country looks very small. As the Dudley Moore character Arthur said in the film by the same name, the country is so small you could carpet it. It looks small, and it looks like you could get around and do all these things in one day. There are several very good highway kinds of roads, and even those are charming. It's amazing, you're driving along a highway in Ireland, and suddenly there's all these sculpture gardens and various kinds of sculptures, mobiles, along the roadside. Tremendous interest and passion for the arts, but that's what makes the Irish very special because that's why I identify with them. I kind of have the same fabric that makes up the threads of my being. I'm either 100% or maybe 200% in, or I don't want anything to do with it. There is no gray. It's black and white. I'm either all in or leave me alone. And I find that everything that the people in Ireland tackle, whether it's creating a hotel or creating a masterpiece in art or jewelry or fashion design or literature or music, whatever it is they're doing, tangible or intangible, they do it with passion and excellence, and it will blow you away. So let me recommend my favorite island destination to you, Ireland. And I didn't think about that question being on my list of questions, Mark, when I got dressed today. So I'm in emerald green. It all fits together very well. I think we had one last question. I hope I can attack it.
Yes, we did. We had a call or an email from Brad, and he was watching you on, or will be watching you on KAZD TV in Dallas, Texas. And
What makes you think he will be watching? He must be watching now.
He better be watching. Otherwise, we're going to go out there and...
Nothing like threatening your viewers.
Right.
He better be watching.
He said he read last month that visitors to the United States have dropped, and he wants to know, what do you think about that?
Oh my gosh. We've only got a few minutes left. You got a week, Brad? It's tragic. It's really tragic. After 9/11, I want to say it was probably in 2003, I was invited by the U.S. Department of Commerce to a conference, symposium in Washington, D.C. And the symposium was about the drop in incoming travelers to the U.S. after 9/11. And there were people, I don't remember anybody's name, but there was one man who was the head honcho, the president of Georgetown, the University of Georgetown. There was somebody from the medical school at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. There were people talking about medical tourism, about people not being able to get visas to come to the United States and have their surgeries and whatnot. This is a unique kind of tourism that generates untold billions and billions and billions of dollars for the U.S. And when we tightened up on giving visas to people from places like Saudi Arabia and other Middle Eastern countries, there were people who died waiting for a visa. And there was a terrible story told at that symposium about a 12-year-old girl, and they kept sending them, they lived 12-hour drive from the U.S. Embassy in the Middle East. And they kept coming back, and they kept telling them you have to come back with something else, and you had to come back with another piece of paper. And in the interim, the 12-year-old girl passed away. It was just a horror story. There is huge business for the economy of the U.S. attached just to that, because people coming in, they don't have homes here. They live in hotels, they eat in our restaurants, they rent our cars, and they buy things while they're here. Plus, all the medical infusion, the expenses that they incur associated with their surgeries and procedures and whatnot. It is tragic. And in the next episode, I'm going to talk about this some more. Watch Abrams, SABRAMS.com/blog, for a blog that I will do as a follow-up to this specific question, because we are losing billions of dollars. I just came back from Ireland about 6 weeks ago. I have to tell you, I met Rolling Eyes, and the Irish love Americans, and they have so many cousins and relatives in the U.S. They feel like, we are all woven together in one big family. And yet, rolling eyes and comments that were very uncomfortable for me. I haven't seen that before. We are developing an unfriendly face to other peoples of the world, and that's not good for our economy. Schools, people that send their kids for prep school and for college in the US, back in 2003 when I went to the symposium, that was a $12 billion economy yearly for the US. And it was dropping off dramatically because professors couldn't get visas to come back and teach. And when people install their kids in a college or a prep school in the US, the whole family comes over to make sure they're settled. They come back during the year to visit. And after the child has graduated and maybe marries and has an immediate family, they bring that family back to see where I went to school, meet old friends that I made during college. It's huge business that we can't afford to lose. And so that's a kind of a down note to end this hour on, but it's something we really have to pay attention to. So we'll talk about it more. And when you see Star Wars, think of Portmagee in County Kerry, Ireland. And we're going to talk about that in upcoming shows, along with lots of guests and remote visits to places all over the world. Where did the hour go? Come back next week. Gotta fly now.